It's been nearly a decade since the last No More Heroes game, and finally, after the long wait, we're at the dawn of something new. And before we start getting into where we're going in the franchise, we should talk about where it's been. I ain't here to yank your chain by reading off Suda51 wiki quotes, and I sure as shit ain't gonna mention the following trivia at all in my video. Johnny Knoxville, Paris, Texas, Star Wars, Bukkake. This is Grasshopper A-Sides. We're here for fun. What do you say, bro? Join me. Let's see how far we can take this. It's gonna be 2 parts though. And you there, clicking out of the video, just press Alt F4. Many people are not aware that No More Heroes isn't exactly the first of its kind within Grasshopper Manufacture's library of games. In fact, it's the third in what Suda51 graciously refers to as his sword action trilogy. Hoo-ha, punk rock, all day long. Although none of these games are directly related to one another, they act as spiritual predecessors to the No More Heroes franchise. Both Blood Plus, One Night Kiss, and Samurai Champloo Sidetracked were created during the "oh shit, we're running out of money" era of Grasshopper Manufacture's legacy. Grasshopper has had a consistent problem on their hands since conception. For one reason or another, they just couldn't tap into the Japanese gamer demographic. Even to this very day, their company's titles have found more success internationally than in their home country of Japan. Killer 7 was a financial flop in Japan, according to these numbers I found on the internet. Grasshopper knew that Capcom was not going to fund their next game, and if they were ever going to survive as a company, they needed to find a new company to work with. Bandai, before they became Bandai Namco, reached out to Grasshopper to form a partnership by having them develop 2 games based on Blood Plus and Samurai Champloo. This partnership seemed like a pretty good idea, both in a financial and strategic sense. When you're creating a licensed title, you're basing it off an established franchise, so you already have an audience in place that's familiar with the work you're basing it on, pretty much guaranteeing you sales. These 2 properties were a big hit in Japan, so their games might end up becoming Japanese gamers' first introduction to Grasshopper Manufacture. Keeping first impressions in mind, Suda wasn't just gonna make any old run-of-the-mill anime adaptation video game. Our boy's an auteur, so he's gonna take the engine from his life's work, Killer 7, and cram it into a video game based on an anime he didn't give a shit about, adding an art house quality to a dollar store video game. But if he didn't make this choice, Grasshopper would have gone tits up. So please join me in paying my respects to Blood Plus, One Night Kiss, and tracing its influence on No More Heroes. The story in the game was meant to be a self-contained original scenario written by Suda to explain the events surrounding the protagonist Saya between episodes 32 and 33. But due to some conflicts between Grasshopper and the Blood Plus staff, the ending had to be drastically changed and undergo rewrites. Big Balls 51 thought it would be a stellar idea to just go ahead and kill off Saya in the storyline. It's okay, he thought this one through. It's actually not Saya, it's a clone of Saya. That's the story. I'm gonna kill off your most beloved character from your franchise, but it's gonna be a clone. It's gonna be a brutal and unforgiving death scene. Fans are gonna feel betrayed, but it's a clone, so you're not allowed to be mad at me. Bandai was mad at Suda, and according to my sources, they locked him in a human-sized kennel and forced him to rewrite the ending. Without digging any deeper into the storyline, I do want to make mention that Blood Plus was far more ambitious than any anime game had any right to be at the time. First off, it contained an open world structure where the protagonist Saya would run around an open town, enter buildings, and talk with NPCs to take on side quests that would have Saya do things like eliminate all the enemies. In many respects, the world of One Night Kiss could be seen as a beta Sana Destroy. This this was just Grasshopper testing out the open world waters. Another key contribution that Blood Plus offered that would later become a staple in almost every Grasshopper game since were the sword fighting mechanics. Well, in retrospect, the fighting mechanics seem a tad rudimentary. I do want to point out a couple of influencing aspects to it. The sword fighting centered around waiting for an enemy's opening for a chance to strike, and then weakening them enough to perform a QTE-based finishing move. These finishing moves are very over the top and extremely stylish, but they're a little annoying because the QTEs aren't very accurate. No matter how many times I perform the on-screen prompts, Saya sometimes just doesn't perform the finishing move, resulting in the enemy recovering and then forcing me to weaken them again to perform the QTE. The saddest part about this whole affair is that instead of getting volcanoes of blood, you get presented with a $3 sparkler fountain that you bought at a redneck tent. I mean, that's cool, but that's not what I'm looking for in a Suda 51 game, or from a game that contains blood in the title. One last thing I'd like to mention is that Blood Plus incorporated some light dress-up elements, somewhat like the ones you would find in No More Heroes. If you complete a few side objectives, you might be rewarded with a new costume for Saya, which you can select from. Changing her clothes doesn't have any major impact on the game, they're just cosmetic fun, and that also became an aspect found in later Grasshopper titles. For being one of the predecessors to No More Heroes and the first in the Sword Action trilogy, it overall feels like an above-average anime game with strangely fresh ideas and a gorgeous style that owes itself to Killer 7 that I would personally be interested in returning to if it ever receives an English translation. You can check out a more detailed review of this game in the annotations. In the very same year, and directly after Blood Plus, Grasshopper went full steam into making a game based on one of my favorite animes, Samurai Champloo. Unlike Blood Plus One Night Kiss, Sidetracked had the privilege of being released in the West. But that really depends on your definition of privilege. Now, from an outsider's perspective, I can see how Grasshopper Manufacture developing a hip-hop samurai odyssey seemed like a match made in heaven. I will say that Samurai Champloo does have some unique mechanics tucked away in there somewhere, and if you just so happen to like the game, well, great. There's 3 whole long story campaigns of the same repetitive gameplay if you like that sort of thing. Objectively speaking, as the leading resource on Samurai Champloo Sidetracked, the game suffers greatly from issues of difficulty balance, buggy stanky platforming, and a general sense of not being fully tested before being released. The game pits one of the 3 main protagonists against waves and waves of countless enemies that you breakdance and cut your way through, which causes them to explode into coins. Seem familiar? You're a joke! The sword-based battle system was structured around performing combos of strikes and one long button press chain to perform a rhythmic sequence to activate more powerful strikes that are tucked away at the end of a chain. These chained combo sequences were determined based on the record that you're currently equipped with that you bought at the record store that's located smack dab in the middle of a feudal Japanese village, and whatever record you pick determines determines the music that's playing when you fight and also determines that character's fighting style. And if that made sense, well, thanks for listening. While this unique fighting engine seems very cool on the surface, and it is, it certainly was not given enough time to develop into something that feels natural to the flow of battle. And this will become apparent when you're surrounded by groups of enemies at a time, which is all the time. However, there are some things to note. The swordplay in the game gave the players an advantage when they would successfully parry an enemy's strike at the correct time. If executed, it gave them a chance to perform a faster flurry of strikes to counter them, which is not too dissimilar from the dark step dodge found in No More Heroes. Only it makes so much more sense in that game. Sidetracked also contained a user interface that had a proto-tension gauge, but instead of a tiger that would breathe fire, it's represented by this little squiggly man. He dances around, and the more strikes you deliver, he starts dancing a little bit faster until a star populates over his head, which activates this thing called Tate mode, which is a techno dojo where you face off against 100 enemies to some sweet electronica. The open world was dialed down a tad from Blood Pluses. Instead of getting open city streets to explore, you get a tiny little village to explore. There were shops found in the game to purchase temporary upgrades of an attribute of choice, like strength in combat. Not too dissimilar from the gyms found within No More Heroes. The town also contained a couple of minigames that would earn you some money, sort of a proto-side job system. They shoulda carried over the beetle wrestling. The bulk of Samurai Champloo Sidetracked has players venturing down long corridors and destroying hundreds of faceless enemies, which shit out all these coins, which are then used as entry fees to pay off these doormen so you could progress to the boss. In a nutshell, it's exactly like No More Heroes. Why don't you love this game? Well, poor mechanics aside, the exclusion of blood in a game based on an anime series that featured blood prominently seemed like a major compromise made to appeal to a wider audience that ultimately ignored Samurai Champloo Sidetracked in the end. I'm not saying that blood would have solved all this game's problems, but the lack of blood was indicative of Grasshopper manufacturer playing it too safe, which is not something you ever want this studio to do. And if you want to know a little bit more about Samurai Champloo Sidetracked, then you can check out my review of it, located in the annotations below.
Hey, come on, just one bite.
A monkey wouldn't like it. Go suck on a banana or something.
Monkey? That's not cool! You're dissing me, aren't you? That was totally a diss! Don't think I didn't catch that! It's gorillas that eat bananas!
The development of No More Heroes marked Grasshopper's first entry into the 7th generation of consoles, and with it came a big choice. Which console would be the home for Grasshopper's newest title? It would only be natural that the PS3 would be the console of choice, given Grasshopper's past releases on primarily Sony platforms. But during the period of 2006 to 2007, there weren't many PS3s found in most gamers' homes, and there's a big reason why.
The 60GB PlayStation 3 for $599 US, $659 Canadian.
The high price point did very little to convince gamers to buy the PS3, and the paltry lineup of launch games certainly didn't help either. At the time, the Xbox 360 and the Wii were benefiting from Sony's hubris from being on top the prior generation by offering two unique experiences at a much more affordable cost to the average consumer. The Xbox 360 offered a hardcore powerhouse console created to foster the public into the HD generation and bring along with it the golden standard of online matchmaking with Xbox Live. Not to mention it had a pretty stellar lineup of titles, some of which included games from Japanese developers once upon a time. On the flip side, Nintendo's Wii offered a fresh new motion control based casual console that offered empowered 6th generation developers to continue creating within the confines of standard definition without having to invest in expensive HD engines just yet. Say what you will about the quality of the graphics or the waggle motion controls, the Wii was still responsible for bringing back old gamers to Nintendo, as well as establishing a brand new, previously untapped market of gamers. It was nothing short of a phenomenon. Suda almost went with the Xbox 360 until Yasuhiro Wada, a close friend of his and designer of Harvest Moon, convinced him to go with the Nintendo Wii because of the unique control scheme that the Wii would provide Project Heroes. Suda thought about this for a moment, and then he said, "Okay." There was one issue. The Nintendo Wii had a reputation for being a console for kids and family. Not exactly a great fit for the open world scale of Project Heroes, or the extremely graphic content Suda was known for. Keep in mind, the last big mature rated game that was released during this era of time was Rockstar's Manhunt 2, which was infamously censored to avoid an AO rating, and they chose to hide all the graphic violence of the kills. Either blood would splash the screen, obscuring what was really going on, or the camera would be cleverly repositioned just so the kill would take place out of frame. But for some reason, Poo Poo and Pee Pee were just fine.
If you make a noise, they'll hear you.
It really said something about the times when Rockstar, of all companies, was fearful of putting out too graphic of content. Suda must have taken this to heart, because he vowed to create a game that was bloodier and gorier than Manhunt 2, as well as making it a personal mission to make the first open world game for the Wii. I guess nobody told him about the Godfather Black Hand Edition. I don't want to be the one to crush his dream. Still, was his game gorier than Manhunt 2? Yes and no. It really depends on the region of No More Heroes that you're playing. In North America, the game remained completely untouched. Each enemy is like a specially wrapped present that, when opened, sprays a volcano of blood everywhere. It was a true return to Killer 7's form. However, if you're playing the Japanese or PAL release of No More Heroes, inside that present, you got a black spooge of death. How fun. All of the gore and decapitations were either toned down or removed completely. A total antithesis of what No More Heroes stood for. Happy birthday, son. The censorship of blood did little to attract a Japanese audience to No More Heroes, as only around 10,000 copies of the game sold during its launch in Japan. The failure of the Japanese launch event of this game lives on eternally in this picture of Suda and his little toilet paper pyramid mountain. I'd like to think that this was the moment where Suda accepted that his efforts in Japan were all in vain, that perhaps a focus on the West was where the future for his company lied. The game went on to sell just around numbers total copies in Japan, but in the West it fared far better, coming in at nearly 10 times the amount of numbers of copies. By all accounts, it became a Western favorite title on the Wii and helped shape the future direction of Grasshopper's games to feature even more sword action in their later titles. It truly was a pivotal turning point for this little company. The two most recognizable aspects of No More Heroes are Travis Touchdown himself and his beam katana, bloodberry, lightsaber, Schwartz. Whatever you want to refer to it as, it's what drew a lot of people to this game. While the lightsaber mechanics may have been the main draw to bait people into the franchise, it's Travis himself that keeps us around for the long haul. What makes Travis Touchdown an interesting character besides his name,
Travis Touchdown. It's a good name, don't you think?
are the flaws put into place to contrast all of his badass qualities. Travis is somewhat of a contradiction. He's both an otaku and an assassin at the same time. These two things typically don't go together.
Moe.
A cool guy on the surface with a deep inner nerd core may seem like a commonplace occurrence in the modern day, but at the time of its release, Travis was a breath of fresh air to an industry that touted grim, dark, muscle-bound, meathead protagonists that took themselves a little too seriously. The main difference here being that Travis was fun.
Wow, Travis, this is your lucky night.
Me? They want me? Serious? You gotta be kidding.
Go get him, Tiger.
Travis stood as a mascot for Eastern media combining with Western to culminate into a farcical byproduct of the two. From a surface level point of view, he seems quite two-dimensional at first. He's a badass killer driven by his need to be the top-ranked assassin, and at the same time driven to get a little puss. A tale as old as time. Although Travis does indeed pull off stylish wrestling moves, spouts out one-liners at his foes,
Cranberry chocolate sundae!
and cuts through hundreds and hundreds of enemies with relative ease, he's also just as much shown to fail multiple times or often becomes the butt of many embarrassing situations.
Guy get some privacy? At least when he's taking a dump?
The cool and the nerdy side of Travis are constantly at odds with each other, which makes Travis a well-rounded and interesting character. Much like his creator, Travis tends to wear his passions on his sleeves. He decorates his dingy little hotel room with anime-themed, video game-themed, and wrestling collectibles to reflect his interest, or in some cases, perversions. And he probably fucked that pillow. Despite being a bloodthirsty mass killer, Travis also has a soft spot for animals, caring for his kitty cat Gene. Outside of all the ranking matches, we get an idea of Travis's day-to-day life in Santa Destroy. He goes to the gym where his master Thunder Ryu removes all of his clothes in order to learn the very important secret training. Gotta do what you gotta do to be the best.
I wait for you.
Travis also has an interest in fashion of all kinds. If he's not out dumpster diving for shirts, he goes over to Area 51, which is run by Mask Day who's also a Famitsu contributor in real life, where you can load Travis up with the most expensive shades, shirts, pants, shoes, that has no bearing on the actual game, just adds a splash of personality and style. Most definitely my favorite aspect of No More Heroes. I don't know anyone out there in the world that can rock a tit shirt better than our main man. Even though Travis looks like a stereotypical NEET on the surface, he manages to leave his home to go pull himself up by his own bootstraps by going down to the local temp agency and picking up some fine honest work like collecting scorpions with kitchen tongs. The side jobs are played for comedic effect, but come off as a nuanced commentary about the daily grind of life. They truly represent what it feels like to pick up a part-time job that you just gotta grind through so you can follow your dreams. Sometimes you just gotta show up to the job site, keep your head down, and don't ask any questions like, isn't there a more efficient way to collect all these goddamn coconuts instead of sending out this weeb to punch trees and then shuffle over to a hot dog stand? I can't help but think that Suda 51 is some sort of profit. Take a look around at Santa Destroy. It operates from a gig-based economy where nobody has any steady work, and then you gotta earn all this money to dump into an ATM just so you have a shot at earning a higher rank for a shot at a better life, college. But even after you get to the top, you're just greeted with the sobering reality of blue balls. You look around at your childhood town and all the mom and pop shops are gone and all that remains are giant fucking corporate franchises. And the streets are filled with lifeless NPCs, devoid of any dreams. No More Heroes more like present-day millennial. I would argue that a lot of Travis's charm comes from Robin Atkin-Downes' portrayal of him. He does the best job any voice actor could possibly do after being given a script from Suda51. I'll say that much. Best way I can describe the voice he does, it's like if a weeaboo is trying to imitate the voice of an action hero cool guy he saw on TV, sprinkled with the occasional breaks in the cool demeanor that lift the facade to reveal the inner weeb.
You can't bribe me this time. I've already tasted those goods.
But just a taste. This time, you'll get the 5-course meal.
5 course? Wait, I don't get what that means.
Did you know I am a yoga master?
You don't say.
Are you familiar with any yoga positions?
Like, downward dog?
The dog can do all sorts of things. So can the cobra, the rabbit.
Cobra? Rabbit? Like, together? Oh, hold on. Oh, yeah! I'm in it to win, baby. Number 1, here I come!
It fits perfectly. There was a rumor going around that he wouldn't be reprising the role for the upcoming Travis Strikes Again. This rumor started after the Travis Strikes Again trailer came out, and it was evident that they just hired some random doofus to replace Robin and covered up his shit job with dubstep. What's going on here?
Now you're just gonna confuse people. They need to know about the most hardcore assassin in video games.
And to confuse matters more, then there was an additional rumor that there would be no voice acting in Travis Strikes Again. The source of the rumor was Big Mouth 51, as he stated that the game would not feature any voice acting whatsoever. What gives? I guess there must have been a major change in plans, because just last week, Robin and many of the old series voice actors are confirmed back. Do you take pleasure in fucking with me? Was this move planned from the beginning as a subversion of expectations or reaction to the backlash? Who can say? All I know is I'm just glad he's back. Travis is also well defined by the people he interacts with in his daily life. He has a network of friends, mentors, bosses, love interests, family members, sometimes those are the same thing, hardcore fans, and critics.
Otaku.
All of his interactions with others give you a new detail about his character. We learn about the things that he values most in the dialogue right before a ranked match.
Don't die on me too quickly. I want to gorge myself on this sense of fulfillment till I vomit.
Man! This is what I live for, fighting your own kind. Nothing's more gratifying.
Why do we have to kill each other anyway? If you ask me, it's absolutely meaningless.
It's about determining who's best. That's what it's about.
Do you like fighting?
Yep.
We come to find out that he's more than just a lightsaber masturbator. And deep down, aren't we all? Welcome to the end slate of the very first episode of Grasshopper A-Sides. Man, 2018, what a year. Felt like this time last year I started another big project, Shadows of the Damned, The Untold Story. One of my more popular videos on my channel. I also chopped that one up into pieces and people seem to respond to the whole video series quite well. You know what they say, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. People are full of shit, aren't they? Anyways, if you like this video and you'd like to see part 2, then go ahead and subscribe to the channel, why don't you? Also, I'll be posting the link to part 2 in this area. You won't want to miss part 2. Major shout out to all the patrons of the channel in 2018. I don't expect you to give me anything, but I'm glad you do. It definitely helps keep me motivated and keep this channel going. I really couldn't make these videos without you. I would have given up. I still think about giving up sometimes, but not today. This has been your boy Hikiko, representing Hikikomori Media, signing off for 2018, and I'll see you in part 2.